Welcome back, everybody. Some of you may remember this face from last year. Bill Sherman is joining us again this year. He is Iowa Country School Preservationist. I know last year you talked about the conference, and you're back to talk about it this year, and it's going to be happening up in Story City, correct?
Yes, that's correct. This is our 20th annual Country School Conference, so we're pleased that we've been able to keep this program running for 2 decades.
Yeah, we're excited to learn in more detail about what is going to be happening up there at the conference. But for starters, just talk about being a country school preservationist, what that means, and just the importance of preserving these 1- and 2-room school buildings.
Well, basically, I view myself as a resource. People call and they want to know where this country school might have been located, or they may be working on a building, or they may be writing a history or producing a documentary. And I try and help everybody that wants to preserve country school buildings, histories, and programs.
Okay, talk about why it's important.
Well, I think it's important because the one-room school really determined, had a big impact on Iowa's history and development. We had hundreds of country schools operating in Iowa before Iowa became a state, and they were paid for by families that contributed maybe 50 cents or $1 a session to pay for the teacher. And by the time Iowa became a state, we had about as many operating one-room schools as we do K-12 school districts today in Iowa. Early people, settlers, pioneers that came to Iowa valued education, and they wanted to be sure that their children got an education. And so in many cases, the one-room school was the first public building erected in a township.
And what are some of the things people are asking you when they want to know the history, besides the location of a building? What are some of the questions historians are wanting to know?
Well, the first question is the name of the school.
Okay.
And the name, we do have an official governmental name for every school that operated in Iowa. But what happens is that those names change during the history of the school. Some of these schools operated for 70 or 80, 100 years. And the name would change. They were given an official designation by the Department of Education, but then they became known as the Smith School, named after the farmer whose section of land the school was operating on.
Okay.
Farmers had to donate a section in each of the townships to provide for a school. And these schools had to be located so that no child would need to walk more than 2 miles to get to a school. And we still have that standard in place today, that a school district has to provide transportation if a child has to walk more than 2 miles. But if they're within 2 miles, then it's up to the children to get to school or the parents to take them to school.
Imagine asking our kids today to walk 2 miles so that they can go get an education.
2 blocks and they're grumbling,
but
right?
that shows you the importance of what this was back in the day. And it sounds like people are really curious of the origin and the names and how that all really began when they started popping up across the state.
Well, some people are, and we have varying degrees of interest in various counties and townships, but there are always some people that want to fix up a school building, turn it into a museum of some time where children can visit, and then seniors can come and reminisce.
And experience it. Now, talk when you're putting a conference together for this, talk about what's involved with it. And I know it's because last year it was in Madison County. This year it's up in Story City. And so what can people expect from a conference? Like what are the things that are involved with that people can be a part of?
Well, we have a traditional program during the day on Friday where people present papers, present research, talk about activities that they have developed at their school museum. And then on Friday evening we have a program that varies kind of from location to location. And this year, in Story City, we have an opportunity to show 3 new video documentaries that people, well, 2 new ones and a historic video that people have put together. And then on Saturday, we do a tour of historic buildings, including school museums and other historic buildings. And we're going to start in northern Story County, work our way through down to Ames, the Ames Historical Society. And if the traffic permits and the weather permits, we're going to go onto the Iowa State campus and look at some historic murals that Grant Wood produced that are displayed in the Parks Library.
Okay, and then now who typically attends this conference? Is it other historians? Is it educators? Is it people that are in, part of different school museums across the state? Well,
it's really a variety of people. Sometimes we do have people that are just interested in learning more about Iowa history, and they have an interest in education. Maybe they're a retired teacher, and so they come just to learn more, and maybe that will trigger an interest in them that they'll want to go back home and find out more about former country schools in their area. But we also have people that want to do research and maybe working on a book. This year we have a couple people that are going to talk about books that they did. One book, The History of Country Schools in Madison County. Ron has worked on that for 12 years since he retired from teaching. He decided that he wanted to find out about the history and where one-room schools were located in Madison County. He's got a new book put together, and then Marilyn Meyer from Clay County really did kind of one of the seminal books on the history of country schools in Clay County. And she's a former kindergarten teacher, and she helped me with my book, and then she got interested, and so she said, well, I want to do a history on Clay County. And she organized her book township by township, and then schools in each township. And most of the counties in Iowa had more than 100 operating one-room schools at their peak. 1901, we had 12,623 operating 1- and 2-room schools in Iowa.
Which is kind of why we're known as the capital in the nation of having these one-room country schools.
Right. I think we could make that case because Iowa had more operating 1- and 2-room schools for a longer period of time than any other state. And the reason, we had the richest farmland. A family could live on 80 acres and support themselves and a family. And then those kids had to go to school, and the parents wanted them to go to school. They valued education.
Yeah, a passion for education that still continues on today. And if people want to learn more about that passion, they can do so by attending this conference, correct?
Right.
And there's still room. You talked about one of the documentaries on Friday evening, and you wanted to mention one here, the Amish Incident, that is going to be there's still room for people to go.
Oh yes, yeah. The movie theater in Story City is a historic movie theater. It's one of the longest continuous operating theaters in the Midwest. The Amish Incident talks about an incident that happened more than 50 years ago when the superintendent from Oldwine went out to pick up the children to take them to school because he was told he had to do that by the Department of Education. The kids ran into the cornfield. The Des Moines Register took a photograph that went around the world. And finally, the legislature worked out a compromise that is a standard for the rest of the nation, that it's up to parents to determine how much education is needed by their children. It's not the role of the state to tell parents that you have to have certified teachers. You can use your own teachers to teach if you feel that they do an adequate job. And the Amish teachers, I know firsthand, they do an adequate job. One thing that is required by the state is that children going to the Amish schools that are taught by Amish teachers, they have to take tests. It used to be called the Iowa Test of Basic Skills.
Right.
It's got a new name now, and what we see when we look at the research, the Amish children start out far below kids in 3rd grade that take the Iowa tests. But by the time those children reach 8th grade, they're at or above the norms in reading and math. They don't do well in science because the Amish don't want science taught in their schools.
But we can learn more about that in the conference, Bill, when
lots of
coming
history
up.
and education.
Incredible
and
things to learn that is the basis of what our state is all about. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Absolutely.
It's always fun to be here and to talk to you.
Iowa Country School Conference coming up 11th and 12th up there in Story City.
There
Check
you
it
go.
out.